This is the RS4 Bug Bash webcast. Happy to have everybody here. Glad so many of you have joined us today in the room as well. I am your host, Jason, North Face Hiker on Twitter, as always. Jen, I think everybody knows you.
Sorry. It's not you. I just found a bug for the Bug Bash.
There you go. That's what it's about.
Yes, I am Jen. I am a usual suspect here. My last name is Gentleman. It is really my last name. It is not some cool moniker, although it's also kind of a cool moniker. I work on the shell team. We own a variety of things, and I drew a cat. That's as far as I'm just gonna reach. I'm sorry.
Here, I will help out. That's Jen's drawing for everybody.
That's Donna. That is my best.
It's Donna
attempt.
and a hidden ninja cat in a box.
Yep.
All right.
Can I go next?
Devin.
Devin Sinha. I work on the Feedback Hub, and you can't spell Bug Bash without Feedback Hub. So happy to be here.
Ooh.
He's been working on that one.
I know, right?
Up all night.
He's been prepping that one.
That's good.
Some of you probably recognize Devin. He was here, what was it, October?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh, can you mute the volume? There we go.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
All right, there we go. He was here for the feedback webcast back in, I believe it was October.
That's right.
Along with Yuta and crew. So if you recognize him, that is why. He is, at GIF Dev on Twitter?
That's right.
G-
Yeah, I don't have my laptop here today, so that's why I'm not in the chat.
That's
But
why
I'm
he
here.
hacked my computer.
Yeah, before the webcast started, he totally hijacked Jen's computer and was typing in chat. Trip?
I'm Trip. I'm on the networking team in Windows.
If you got stuff that deals with networking and you want to yell at somebody, yell at me first, and I'll make sure and pass it to him.
There's a buffer zone.
I know, right? I take all the bad stuff and then filter it.
My name's Matt, and I'm on the Xbox team. And I get the privilege of being the RS4 Bug Bash lead this time around. And kind of my main role is to coordinate an amazing team of folks who make the Bug Bash happen. And really, all I need to do is let veterans like Nikki and Jennifer and Jason make sure they're not blocked from pulling off the best Bug Bash ever.
Awesome. And he helps coordinate the donuts, which it's one of the important roles of whoever's leading the Bug Bash. Because if there are no donuts, there is a revolt that will happen. Yeah, well, you get in the habit of doing something, and if you take that something away from people,
You must have the donuts.
yeah, the donuts are required. Which we had donuts yesterday.
Some people are saying they can't hear people at the end.
Really?
We'll talk about that.
All right, so let's try
Probably
this.
louder.
See, I told you we work on this along the way. So I'm just gonna pick this up and move it down.
I think Jason and I are pretty loud.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and then I can also adjust this a little bit.
Although now the
We will
mic
see how
is
that works.
closest to me.
If somebody yells that it's too
It would
loud,
be really loud.
can we
Turn that one down.
Yep. Knock that back a little
The
bit.
gain.
Okay. So we'll figure this out for this webcast, and then the next one, we'll have it all set up as appropriate. All right.
All right. Hi, guys. My name's Nikki. I'm on Fundamentals. I'm a program manager running the Community Champs program. Essentially, I deal with hundreds of engineers around Microsoft that love your feedback and try to push it to our other engineering teams to get your bugs fixed and your feedback answered. I'm also on the RS4 Bug Bash planning team, so there's a variety of tasks involved to make this whole thing run. So happy to be here.
And welcome to for Trip and for Matt and for Nikki, first webcast, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I was a bystander in the other one. I sat in the very far corner.
Oh, that's right.
Observed.
That's right.
I didn't interact.
Blair.
Yeah, I'm Blair Glennon. I work primarily on the Windows Insider program for business. So for any of the IT pros, Brandon needs to sit back.
Yeah.
Is what Joe is saying.
Marty McFly.
But today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about data science because my other hat is kind of the liaison with our core data science team. There's a bunch of all-stars over there that make me and the Insider program look good with the data that they pull back in, both from flighting and feedback. The two parts of the Insider program really are powered by data science. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Come on, Brandon.
I'm Brandon. I work with Jason on the Windows Insider program team, and you guys all know me, so. Yeah.
Hiding it in the corner here, I'm Peter.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm a program manager in the graphics team. I haven't been participating in the webcast before, but I thought I'd come and check it out today.
Awesome. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to drag you in. This is going to happen. So,
There you
real
go.
quick, as an intro for Brian, And lean a little bit further. Come on, man. And there you go. All right, that's Brian.
Perfect.
Sorry,
Some of you have seen him pop onto Twitter, both either... What is your Twitter handle? Brian_MSFT?
BRLYNC_.
Okay, there we go. If you've seen any, chat coming from that Twitter handle, as well as, a bunch of the stuff that's on the Windows Insider handle, he's been doing a ton of the troubleshooting and question and answering there as well. So, this is Brian. Get him some FaceTime. Everybody say hi. Oh yeah, and then I was threatened with life and limb that I have to do this. So apparently my mom and grandma are both watching the webcast today. So hi mom, hi mama, how y'all?
Hi, Mom.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I love this. This is so much fun. Anyway, so. Mixed bag of things today. As Blair mentioned, he kind of let the cat out of the bag.
Sorry.
No, it's totally fine, right? Totally fine.
Who is this guy? What is he talking about?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Probably has
We're going to
grass.
find out who you are today. Blair's going to talk to you about data science, and he's got a full fancy pants presentation and everything ready to go. And then, of course, once he's done, we're going to talk about some bugs. We'll talk a little bit about Quest, some of the feedback you gave to some questions that I asked back in January. I'm going to talk about some of the future plans that I have for the program, which I haven't talked to anybody else about other than Donna. So I might be letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. But without further ado, Blair, take it away, man.
Sure. So I think we're going to flip on...
Yep, you're already good.
All right, we're there.
Just like that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of a visual learner. And so when I start with a question that Jason wanted me to talk through is like an intro to what data science is. And this is very much a set the groundwork for data science. You're not going to walk out of here as an expert, but you're going to be well on the way. I like to frame it in something that we all kind of understand. We all know what hacking skills are. We all know what math and statistical knowledge are. And substantive expertise means you kind of know what you're talking about. And so this is the way that it's been taught to me, and I really grok data science is an overlap of those three things. Any two of those subjects on their own isn't data science intuitively. It'll kind of lead back to other areas that you may or may not know about. Like somebody who is a traditional researcher, a professor sitting in a Ivy Tower will use a lot of statistical knowledge, probably not a lot of hacking skills, and they'll use their substantive expertise. Where you get in trouble is if you have hacking skills without any math or statistical knowledge and you have substantive expertise, because you'll start making inferences that aren't actually there just based off of your own biases. And so really the overlap of all of those things is data science. And where this comes into play, at least in the Windows Insider program, is we get petabytes of feedback coming in. Mm-hmm. Think about data science as a way to do coding on statistics and being able to find interesting information in a large sea of data. Okay?
All right.
So with that, there's a series of questions that data science can answer. And these are the 5 questions. Basically, you're going to answer one of these 5 things. Is this thing A or B? Is this thing weird? How much or how many is kind of a prediction. How is our data organized? And then what should I do next? And so...
Weird being the technical term.
Weird is the technical term. And so all of this is kind of lifted from a Microsoft Machine Learning Studio Data Science for Beginners video, which I will say if you want to go more in depth beyond what I'm saying here, definitely check that out. Link at the bottom. I'm sure Jason can share this out later.
Yeah, for sure.
But the technical terms for all of those kind of fun questions is going to be popping up on the screen for everyone else in the webcast, not so much in the room here. Is it A or B as a classification problem? Do we sort something as feedback that comes from a group of people that are insiders, or do we sort of as feedback from people that are retail? That would be a classification type thing. Anomaly detection, the is it weird? Think about that as we get a spike in feedback around a release of a build. That's not necessarily an anomaly that we need to care about, but if we see a spike in something that doesn't really make sense for us to see, like a spike of feedback around a non-build time in a particular issue, that would be an anomaly that we'd want to flag out. Regression is kind of the basics of predictions. You might remember linear regression from a math class somewhere in your past where you had a bunch of dots.
Math.
Exactly. So you know about reducing R squared and getting the best fit of a line. That's going to be your prediction of how much or how many. How is it organized? This is a really fun one that talks about setting up data and saying where are the natural clusters in the actual data, so that you say, we have this group of feedback over here, a group of feedback over here. Do they belong together based off of these other characteristics that we know? Yes or no, and it brings them into those kind of clustering things. And then reinforcement algorithms is kind of what we all think of as traditional machine learning, like the really advanced stuff, where you start saying, hey, in PowerPoint, you build a slide that's based off of AI. That's reinforcement algorithms that go in and learn based off of themselves, have train and test type things to say that this worked, this did not work, and doing that over and over again until you get something pretty eloquent. So those are the kind of 5 questions, and those are the building blocks for all of data science, essentially. And that turns into things like sentiment analysis. Was this a positive piece of feedback or a negative piece of feedback? Time series analysis. Do we expect things to be peaks and valleys based off of winter? Like, think about Christmas. That would be a seasonality analysis. Predictions. Do we expect this to do well? Do we expect this to do poorly? But there are also more advanced forms of all of these questions that show up from the simple linear regression all the way into like random forests or boosted trees, stuff that if you really want to get advanced and study this for a career, they are what power our data science efforts around the world. So with that, I want to say we're going to dive into 2 things here. We're going to talk about 2 of the questions. First, clustering, because I think that one's pretty interesting, and it kind of starts us off with like, what can data do when pulling it out of the different visualizations? Then we'll go into regression, because that is probably a little bit more math-based, because remember that top circle is all about math and statistical knowledge, and it is the basis for a lot of other information. And I got a couple of examples, and then for regression, we actually have a demo from the Azure Machine Learning Lab that anyone can do on their own. I started off with some of the more advanced when I was like, we're not going to be able to talk through this in an hour-long setting. So we have a demo of how regression works with predicting bike share demand. So yeah.
Okay.
So I kind of started with a lot of Windows-based data, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't intentionally or unintentionally showing things we weren't supposed to. So we went to bike share data for our actual predictions.
100%.
Is it because it's Seattle? Is that why you went with bikes?
Actually, it's I'm from Washington, D.C., and it's D.C. bike share data. Yeah, back in 2010 and 2011. So substantive expertise, remember being that bottom corner there, and I have substantive expertise about Washington, D.C., so that's what we're going with.
Well, it's not my fault you like a substandard baseball team, because the Rangers are the best, regardless of how much you love the Nationals.
I think the Astros are statistically the best right now.
I wouldn't challenge a player on that.
All right. So, I mean, that's another good point. The substantive expertise really does come into play with data science, because you need to like what you do. And so I actually learned data science studying baseball, which is nation's pastime and an unhealthy obsession of mine. So let's dive into clustering or cluster analysis. So basically clustering is taking the partitioning of data points into groups so that those data points make sense to each other and the different groups are as far away from each other, meaning that they're as unique as possible. So when you use clustering, when you're trying to figure out grouping space of a problem, but you don't already have a relationship established. So we can do group by based off of, like, in the Insider program, we can group feedback based off of whip slow and whip fast. This is feedback coming from slow and fast. That's not a clustering problem because it's predefined by a variable of whip slow, whip fast. If we wanted to say, this is all of the feedback that is negative, that would be something that isn't necessarily a flag or a categorical variable, that we've assigned to it, and so you could cluster based off of sentiment. And it's also very good to explore data to try to figure out if you don't know much about the area that you're diving into. And some of the images that I have coming up, they don't have classification labels assigned to them that you could get wrapped up in the axle of, well, this could mean this and that could mean that. It's purely just exploration and saying, well, where do these fits? And kind of outside of this world, recommendation engines tend to be very strongly based off of clustering or cluster analysis. So if you say that, like, you listen to a music service and it recommends something based off of your past listening habits, that is probably done being clustering or clustering analysis. Okay? So types of clustering, soft clustering versus hard clustering. You want to make sure that a soft cluster versus a hard cluster is there overlap or is there clear definition? You want to make sure that there is exclusivity. A single data point shouldn't belong to multiple clusters. But that's kind of like the basics of clusterings, and there's different algorithms that I'm probably not going to talk about right here.
So as somebody else used to refer to me, mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive.
MISI,
Yeah.
mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, as we're getting into this, right? I know you have more to cover.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I want to, like, you know, because this is some pretty thick material for people who haven't had an exposure to data science before,
Sure.
right? There's a lot of statistics.
Yep.
You know, once you actually get into it, there's a lot of math. Obviously, there's coding involved, things like that. One of the things to keep in mind here is this is the type of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't really put in front of insiders, right? We don't have lectures and talks on it, right? This is part of the reason why we're having this discussion here on the webcast today, is because this is the type of stuff that gets applied to your feedback that comes in and to the telemetry that's coming in. Once that data gets grouped in, like, you start looking at all the feedback that has come in from a build, all the telemetry that has come in, all the data, and this type of learning gets applied to it, and it helps us pick out trends, things that are bugs that we didn't find, that insiders haven't reported. We've caught bugs that way. Trends that you've brought to our attention that are affecting specific types of machines and things like that. Like, this is the not so glamorous side of the business, right? And I'm not trying to,
No.
I'm not trying to slight data science, right? But this isn't the fun, the taco hat aspect of the business, right? Where it's fun and engaging, and the community gets together. But there is a lot of heavy lifting that's done on the back end to help make Windows better, and it's all based upon the information that you're providing to us.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example is, like, a lot of our feedback gets upvotes, gets really high, and, like, that by itself is a really clear indicator that something's wrong with there. But there's other feedback, like all of the SIUFs, which are the little toasts, where you just have that one response. And we get millions and millions and millions of these, which I, as an individual engineer, can't go through them all. But we use clustering to try and help detect bigger issues.
Yeah, and it's powerful in the same way that software is powerful. It's massively reproducible. It's massively scalable. When you think about, like, the difference of writing code to do a routine with a for loop, it means that it's doing that thing over and over again rather than somebody sitting there having to type the same thing over and over again. If you think about that analog with data science, instead of having somebody with substantive expertise looking at the data every single day and trying to make their own inferences, it's, instead of typing that same thing over and over again, this is the equivalent of building a for loop for analysis. Okay? So, thank you for framing that, guys.
Yeah.
And now let's dive into some math. So one form of clustering is called k-means. A k-means cluster, it intentionally leaves out the number of clusters that you are going to define and says you're going to have k, where k is any number where the algorithm can decide whether or not we have 1 cluster, 7 clusters, 32 clusters. It tries to find the correct number of clusters in the data so that you are mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And you run through this enough times, and it's an iterative process, until you have the fewest number of clusters and the centroid, the center of the cluster, doesn't change. And so it's a single value used to represent that cluster, is that centroid. It's determined by the distance, each of those data points around that individual centroid. And you repeat that process. If you start with 100 clusters, you bring it down to as few as possible. where that centroid doesn't change. Okay, so
I
that's
need a picture.
okay. So it's a good thing you asked that. Up here, we're gonna talk about the different points here. I'm not a good drawer.
Fine.
That's why they made PowerPoint.
That's why they make PowerPoints. And so we're going to start with the distance measure. So there's the Euclidean distance, which is space between 2 points. And this is just to demonstrate that there's different ways of calculating distance. And then there's the Manhattan distance. So that's the city of New York, the borough of Manhattan. There's a lot of lefts and rights that you have to make to get from point A to point B. Most of the time when you're calculating distance, it's Euclidean, but there are other ways to calculate it if you have other constraints within your data. The centroids, you have the k-median, the median of the data points, whereas the k-medoid is the actual representative data point. And then the convergence, when it all comes together, is about reducing that sum of squared error. So, Jen, when you were talking earlier about linear regression, it's the reducing the r squared. You want to bring back the sum of squared error with as few variables as possible.
So, for those who may not be math majors or may have never been exposed to statistics,
Sure.
break it down. Give it to me in simple terms.
Okay, so if we talk about a linear regression, you have a bunch of dots in a row, okay? You want to draw a line through it
Yep.
so that the distance, the sum distance
Yep.
from your line to all of the dots is minimized. And so you square it because you don't want to sum all of the negatives because a positive plus a negative means it goes to zero, right? So you are penalizing both sides equally by squaring it. So that's what you talk about with the r squared.
I took stats in college.
Okay.
Like this stuff makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But, like, I love you, Mom. I love you to death. Don't yell at me and stab me at Christmas for this one. My mom is not a stats major.
Right. It's trying to.
Still love you.
There goes the Christmas.
Gonna suck this year.
It's about making it so that you have the most closely fitted line to the data. That's what it's about. You are trying to draw the line that best describes the data that you're working in.
It's like this.
You're stealing
I'm
a
an
chart
artist.
from Future.
I was trying to align the pattern that
This.
exists.
Yep.
Look, I'm an artist.
Jen, here we go. This is what we're talking about in a visual setting.
Right. And so the other visual is around centroids and how they're chosen. So we have 3 different data points in here. We have orange or a reddish in the lower left, a green in the top portion, and a blue in the lower right. So we start with the centroids and we have to say, well, is this 3 clusters? And so it'll start with a bunch of different areas and it'll find these natural areas where it does make sense. So the lower left-hand corner, that's the optimal clustering where all of the green points are in one category, all of the red points are in one category, and all the blue points are in a different category. You'll note that it does actually miss a couple of data points there. You see that in the original points you have 2 green outliers that get assigned to blue. That might be because the centroid is a little too high, who knows? But you also have an example of something where it's a suboptimal cluster, where the original green points have now been split between blue and green, and both of the lower clusters are assigned to red. That's not the way that you want to do k-means clustering.
So I'm going to try to. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, right? So, bear with me because I did not go through Blair's presentation ahead of time. So a real world example of doing something like this
Don't you always fly by the seat of your pants?
Yeah, well, it's just how it goes. Yeah, it's way more fun that way. To relate this to the Insider program, right?
Yeah.
When we get all this data back,
yeah,
and we're seeing deployment errors, right? There's crashes coming in, and there's this entire stack of, hey, we have this entire bucket of these people cannot install. We can take and split the data into different crash buckets, figure out what's going on, and then you'll get grouped into Group A, Group B, Group C. This is where this like A versus B versus C and all this stuff starts coming together. Everything gets split, right? So instead of looking at one massive chunk of data, it gets split into groups, and then depending on how those groups get aligned, there may be more than one root cause, depending on the additional data that came in. because oftentimes for a single error code, like say you see 8007, 0102, something like that, there may be more than one root cause tying to that particular bug number. So as the data gets reanalyzed, that one bucket that appeared to be one error code that was originally put together in one lump, as the data gets further analyzed, it may be split into two, where two separate errors were giving the same error code but have very different root causes. And as you get further into the analysis, that's when you start splitting this out. So please, for everybody out there, don't get super caught up in thinking, hey, this is crazy sounding. Like, this actually has real world implications in how we dig into what we end up solving on your behalf.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that this is just like one slice.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to go kind of deep in one particular technology when there is an entire portfolio available to the data science team that works on it.
There are people who go to university and study this and make entire careers out of this. So it's one of those tough things, like the last webcast when we were talking about release management. Trying to cram the whole concept of release management into an hour-and-a-half webcast, which we went over and didn't even really finish all the materials we had. We kind of had to zip through the end of it. Trying to cram the entirety of data science into an hour, of a webcast, it's really not feasible, but it's a good primer to give you an idea of some of what we do on the backside with the information that comes in.
Absolutely. So with that note that we're only talking about one technology, there is this particular, like, full transparency, like this particular technology of k-means clustering actually struggles with a couple things. So if you have different size, and part of knowing like the substantive expertise is knowing like where your model is going to fail. K-means fails or needs to be helped with different size data clusters. So on the screen here we have 3 different clusters that we as humans can see, if you're not colorblind, a green, red, and blue. But k-means clustering would assign it to 3 different clusters that look suboptimal, where you have pulled clusters or pulled data points from the red cluster into the green and blue just because it's trying to make them similar sizes. So that's one place that it fails. It also fails with different densities of data points. So again, us as humans, we can see red is a cluster, blue is a cluster, green is a cluster, but it sees them in different concentrations. And so if you go back to what we were talking about earlier of it doesn't want the centroids to move depending on how it slices the data, it does that by bringing like that rightmost centroid in the suboptimal cluster on the right side of the 2 red dots. That won't move if it increases its iterations. Neither will the blue or the green that it actually identified. So it does struggle with different densities in data sets. Okay? And then the other place that it struggles with is shapes. So this right here, again, we can see red and blue are very human definable as, okay, these belong in different groups. However, just looking at the distance from that centroid, that you wind up with 2 suboptimal clusters where the blue and red get overlapped with each other and it has a high right and a low left instead of a kind of an S shape there. Okay? So that was the caveat of clustering k-means clustering doesn't work for every case, but it is the basis for, or clustering itself is the basis for a lot of computational power. So I probably should have led with regression, since we had to draw this on the little piece of paper.
You can turn the gain down just a smidge.
Turn the gain down just a smidge. Okay.
The thing is apparently picking up typing.
Like Brandon.
It's super sensitive.
My rigorous typing.
Sorry, we're making a mic adjustment here. I told you we were going to be doing this a few times during the webcast. Apparently that thing is like hypersensitive in a good way.
Yeah.
That's the joy of omnidirectional. Sorry, please continue. I apologize.
I shouldn't type so furiously.
Just trying to make stuff happen.
With great vengeance and furious typing.
Do you wear out the keys on your keyboard, like you have to replace them?
Actually, my dev box has no
letters on it?
No letters on it.
Okay.
It's always funny when people come into my office and like they're like, what? And I'm like, you've been here for years. You should be a touch typist by now.
I still use Hunt and Peck, so that's fine. No. All right, so regression, the more basic, and I thought I was leading with the very interesting topic of clustering, but Jason shot that down. We'll go with the basic regression. And I'm using regression as a way to talk about the the different variables and what goes into making data science, because it isn't all the super exciting clustering that I just walked through. There's actually some fundamentals that need to be in place before you get to the fancy stuff. And so this was the simple linear regression image from Wikipedia that we all are familiar with. That red line is an example of a regression. You see the blue dots, they all are tightly aligned around that red line. And if you moved it up a couple degrees or changed the angle a couple degrees, it wouldn't fit the data as well. So it's about finding a line that fits the data at the best. And that's a linear regression, strictly talking about a line, not any other kind of regression. So when you're talking about regression, we have to talk about the types of variables. This is the data that's in the bike share demo that we're going to potentially talk through later, assuming we have time. And there's essentially 4 different types of variables that regression cares about. And they are contained, all of them, in this data set, so good on this. There's discrete variables. So in here we have the instant, which is like the unique identifier for that row in the data set. We're not going to be talking about that since it's a unique ID. We have hour, we have working day, weather, and we have wind speed. So the basis of this problem is we have 17,000 data points that say each hour, one station in Washington, D.C. has used bikes. People check out the bikes, they check them back in. How many bikes were used in each of those 17,000 data points? There's a number of different factors that are likely to affect bike rental. One of them is, what time is it? Somebody checking out a bike at 0-100 hours, midnight essentially, that demand should be pretty low, theoretically. Whether or not it's a work day, people take bikes to go to work. So whether or not something fits in a working day is probably a variable that we care about in predicting how many bikes are going to be demanded. What the weather is like is going to be a big factor. If it's sunny, people are going to ride bikes. If it's rainy, because they're not from Seattle, people aren't going to ride bikes. And then the wind speed. If it's really windy, people probably aren't going to ride bikes. So what we have is we have 4 different variables that I've broken out here. The first variable we're going to talk about is discrete. So these are essentially true-false binary variables. Is it a working day or isn't it a working day? And so that's something that a regression would care about of, is it a 0 or a 1? Know whether or not to apply a prediction based off of that. Okay? The next type of variable is a continuous variable. This is something that can run from any number to any number with any number of gradients in between. So 0 to 1, you can see we have everything down to the 0.0001 level of wind speed. And this is normalized based off of, I think if you multiply it by, I can't remember what you multiply it by to get the actual wind speed in a human intelligible factor. So that's a continuous variable. There's no steps in how it's assigned. Ordinal variables are kind of like categorical or kind of like discrete variables, except they have a order to them. Like 0 is lower than 1, is lower than 11, is lower than 24. Okay, so it's the same kind of stepwise categorization that we did earlier, except you want to be able to say that something's high, medium, low based off of being ordinal.
So a good example of that is when we, submit the question of, hey, would you recommend this build? Give it a score kind of a 1 to 5.
NPS is an ordinal variable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's correct. And so each of those data points would be stored as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we know that they mean something that is incremental from each other.
Yep.
And so you would predict an ordinal variable based off of that. Okay? And then the last data type that we're going to care about is categorical. So you'll note that 1, 3, 1, 4 as weather doesn't make sense to most of us, right? Okay, cool. Just making sure nobody's really familiar with this data set already. In this data set, 1 means that it is a sunny day. So on the 12th instance of this data point, it was sunny. 3 means that it was light snow. And 4 means that it was heavy rain. I think I remember those correctly. We actually break it down later. But it's basically saying that there is no relationship, like ordinal values, where 4 is greater than 3 is greater than 1. No, that doesn't really matter. It's literally saying that If you have 3, that light rain categorization,
It represents something specific.
something specific.
Yeah.
And whereas if you do a ordinal value, you could have something where it's an additive effect for each increment you go.
Yeah.
You can't do the same thing with a categorical variable.
Yeah. So like in this example, if 1 is sunny, 2 is rain, 3 is windy, and 4 is snow, right? When logging that data, the weather on a given day is going to be either 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the given hour that it was captured. But in something, in a separate instance, it depends on like if they were talking about like distance traveled, like how far somebody rode the bike, if that was a data point that was being captured, it's going to be very independent of what the weather was, right? Somebody's riding from point A to point B and it captured X amount of miles, something like that, and that's how you get into these different buckets of data.
Right. And so at this point, we collect this kind of information about insiders and feedback to say, what you already gave the example of an ordinal variable, which was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
Something that could be a categorical variable is the country that you come from. So you're submitting feedback from the US. You are submitting feedback from China. You are submitting feedback from any other country. That would be a categorical variable that fits into this equation. Now, your machine itself can have something like an ordinal variable as well, like the amount of RAM that's in your machine.
Yep.
So it's going to be represented as a number, 512. Okay. I mean, I'm kind of old.
2 gigs, 8
I'm
gigs.
kind of old, so yeah, I'm going 512. But those are something that's an ordinal variable that if you put it into a regression equation, they mean something, and when they're stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then if you break into something like the continuous variable, the amount of time that it takes to launch Feedback Hub, that would be a continuous variable that is down to the 0.001 second that we would want to be able to track.
Yep.
So
to tie this back to the clustering you were doing earlier, right? A good example of some data that would be performed using some of this type of data, right? Compared into a cluster is machines with certain amount of RAM and how long it takes to launch the Feedback Hub, right? So if you have a machine that has 512 megs of RAM, it may take on average 6 seconds to launch the Feedback Hub, and that would appear as a cluster within the data. And this is obviously
potentially,
This is obviously I'm kind of hypothetical making up data here, right? But you may notice that machines with a gig of RAM, they help pass some of the commands back and forth faster. And obviously, I know CPU comes into play here as well. But you may notice it only takes 3 seconds. But then a machine that has 8 gigs of RAM may assist, and it may launch the Feedback Hub in 1 second, right? You'll start seeing these clusters of data appear. But you can also see the exact opposite, right? And this is how you get into some of those discrete clusters where instead of seeing one cluster where, hey, every machine that has 8 gigs of RAM appears in this cluster, that cluster may split. Because if you see a machine that's got an i3 processor that's at 2 gigahertz, will be slower than the same machine that has more RAM, that has an i7 that's running at, it's overclocked to say 4 gigahertz. Say there's a bucket of those machines. You'll start seeing these discrete buckets of information pop out. And then that influences that overall linear curve that gets built of these discrete data points that show up. And so however far you decide to break the data down gives you more and more buckets of information.
Yeah, and I would say that like you just introduced another categorical variable of whether or not something, or a discrete variable of whether or not something's overclocked.
Yeah.
That's a 1-0 right there.
And that's another yes/no data point.
Yeah, and so what I would say is that what Jason just walked through is like the specific storytelling aspects of what it means, but you can apply that same logic over terabytes of data in a couple seconds if you have a powerful enough machine. So it's
thankfully
like,
we have a few of those hanging around here.
Yeah, and so the demo is on Azure ML, so it is able to turn up the volume a little bit, so that we're not running it off of a 512 meg
Thankfully
computer.
so.
Yeah, it's sitting in my basement.
You don't need
somewhere.
a week to complete this
Yes,
analysis.
exactly. Okay, so the learning, the thing that it cares about, we all started with how many bikes were rented, okay? So that's what we wind up trying to predict. Here are the actuals. If you were to say, what is the 9,125th data point, you could use this to say it's likely to be X number of bikes. But this is where substantive expertise tends to come into play, is that if you look at instant 1808, the one that happened at midnight, there were only 13 bikes rented. well, that kind of makes sense for a low point. So if we go back to, is this an anomaly? Probably not. There's probably something that is hidden behind that. Same thing with 9124. We said that weather pattern of 4, meaning that there's heavy snow, I'm surprised there were 23 people that rented a bike in that hour. But at the same time, you have a data point like 3370, which happened at 7 a.m. on a working day when it was sunny and there wasn't very much wind. Well, big surprise.
A lot of people wanted
a
bikes.
lot of people wanted bikes.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's that, like, you can look at the individual data elements, and that's like the statistical side, and then the hacking skills of writing the skills, but being able to reason over, that's what the data is trying to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the magic happens in data science, is being able to combine all three of those together.
Yep.
Okay? So what to watch out for? This is what a lot of data science is actually spent doing, or a lot of what we wind up doing is looking for problems with the data. Where are there missing observations? Where do we not know what happened on that particular
Holes in the data.
Holes in the data. Data cleanup, because your model is only as good as the data that's built on.
Correct.
So we look for missing observations. We look for encoding variables. So like I was saying earlier, how do we know whether or not something is light snow, heavy rain? If you only are given this information as weather in this format, you want to slice it up into different categorical variables like clear, light snow, and heavy rain, just based off of a translation. And then finally, if you wanted to try to find a different way to quantify a continuous variable, you could bucketize them, you could assign them to different categories, all just trying to find ways to work with the data that makes sense. And then the last thing that you really want to do is look for outliers. So this is a box and whisker plot, which normally you look for everything to be well within the range. And so here we have something that represents 0 to 10, where you have most of the data with a median, that's what that line right there means, around 2. On the right side, where you have normal data, there's no outlier. But for the left side, where you have that big old thing sitting out there, you have to watch out for what happened on that particular day. Is it something that we need to pay attention to, or is it something that we can ignore? And so to like really tie this back to my start with data science and baseball, if you look at population or predicting attendance at a baseball game for a particular starting pitcher, there's certain variables that you want to look out for. And one of the variables is, are they playing the Yankees? Because the Yankees attract a big crowd. Is that an outlier that matters? I don't know. Possibly. But if you're just trying to predict it, it's going to show up as an outlier, and you need to make that quantification of, is this something that's important? So that's where the substantive expertise, again, comes back in. Even if you have a perfectly quantified model, you need to understand what the data is you're working with.
So correlating that back to, in developing Windows, when a feature is being built, right, if we know things about the populations of computers that exist within the world, RAM specs and CPU specs, things like that, and we design a feature, and the feature itself does not perform, say it's going to chew through battery life, or it's going to hog CPU resources and make the machine feel slow, it's good to have this data because it's an impetus. It gives us a change to go back and rework some of the feature, or potentially change how it's architected to have less of a user impact while giving them the benefit of what we're trying to design. So again, like, this data comes back, and seeing some of these outliers will push or pull us in a different direction depending on what's being accomplished by the team developing something at any given point in time.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so with that, I'm going to end with a slide. It was created by machine learning and AI. This was the new feature in PowerPoint that you basically put in some text and you put in a couple images and it builds out a slide. Yeah, it's pretty damn cool. But what we have here is kind of the old school, well, not the old school. It was a couple years ago that I was doing this capital bike share problem, and you can see the upper right-hand corner, that's R, is the language. And Donna, please forgive me for using a white IDE. But that's basically how you load in all the data, and it's the start of a, I think, several hundred line script to predict the demand for bike shares. Fortunately, Azure Machine Learning Labs has pulled together a much more advanced way of doing it. So rather than have you guys look at my code, we're going to look at a flow of how machine learning is done on Azure, which is, once you understand the basics, is a lot more powerful, a lot more scalable to other examples. So with that, I'm going to, assuming everyone can still see my screen. Yep. All right. This right here, everyone can see it by going to aka.ms whip-data-science. And so it is a machine learning studio, regression demand estimation. And so what you're seeing is my very simple script, the one that's sitting up here, is done by the left chain here. Okay? That's like the basic stuff that I was doing when I learned. All this other stuff is more advanced regression predictions. And if I zoom in, zoom, you'll note that each of these different levels has a score model, so it actually compares the output of each of the models and says whether or not they're good and which model is the best. So you're able to force these different algorithms to race each other, give them something to score them on, and then you come up with the best set. And so let's start at the very beginning. The bike rental data set. So this right here, it's lets you go in and say pull this data set. And you view the data set, it'll pull up in a CSV file that is the 17,000 rows. You edit the metadata. You go in and say, all right, we're going to take these columns, we're going to have the data type change, and we're going to call them categorical. We do that because, again, we want to classify things as categorical data for our regression.
Yep.
We go in and we select the different data sets and say, launch the column selector. You go in and exclude these different columns because they're not used later on, and then you run down to each of the 4 different branches. Okay, so the one on the left, the really simple one, splits it into train and test. A lot of machine learning and data science is based off of take a portion of the data, build your regression based off of it, predict something that you withheld, and make sure it stands up to scrutiny. Okay, and so you can either, how do we have it split right here? Split data, relative expression, 0, select data in the columns. So you go in and you want to pick like 80% of the 80% of the data points,
Yep.
and then you can do something called folding, and that's where you throw out the original 20% that was your test, bring it into the train set, and pull out another 20% and make sure that that's still
reanalyze the data to make
reanalyze
sure
it.
that it holds up.
Yeah, and you want to avoid something called overfitting with data science or with any kind of regression that says that you describe your data very well, but it's terrible at predicting the future. You can go in and have a perfectly predictive regression model if you give it the answer.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Exactly.
It helps when you know what the outcome is.
Exactly. But it doesn't do any good at predicting future.
Yeah.
So that's why you kind of like penalize the model temporarily by holding values and then add in those values later.
Yep.
Okay? So that's the really simple like split train test. This one right here says, all right, well, let's add some new features, because features are what data science is all about, and say, what are different variables that we can build that would potentially predict how this would work? And so this one looks at the previous 12 hours. Is that indicative of what the next 12 hours demand is going to be? So it creates different data sets. You go in and you can see the R script that's required to do this. Mm-hmm. This is your data set that you come in, the previous 12 instances, and then for each instance, take that and assign it to n-1, n-2.
Yeah.
And this is the hacking skills that was so important. That, like, you have to understand how to build a for loop in order to do this correctly, okay?
So to tie this to the example that you've been going with this bike service, right? The past 12 hours, say it was snowing and super windy, but the next 12 hours it's supposed to be warmer, no wind, and a little bit of rain. Obviously, the pattern that you're going to expect in the next 12 hours wouldn't match what you just saw in the previous 12 hours, presuming that prior data points to that.
Yeah, so in that point, you have to figure out, is there correlation between your different variables, and whether or not that is what you're picking up on by refining your model. So one of the interesting things that that you could wind up doing is that could be an element of overfitting, of taking your previous 12 hours and saying, I have a really strong signal, but it's a interference. That's not the word. It's actually commingling, interangling, something with the weather data, which is the true predictor.
Yep.
And so if that's the case, adding these features for the 12 previous hours, you probably want to throw that away and actually just keep the weather data. Because a lot of what this is around to avoid overfitting is to have the fewest number of variables possible in order to have the most prediction possible, so that you avoid the commingling. I can't remember what the actual word is.
Yeah.
The actual data scientists out there yelling at me like, what's going on? Why is... Yeah. All right.
We think you're doing great.
Thank you, Nikki. I can't remember that word. But we'll say that, this adds new features as well of what does it look like for the 12 previous days in addition to the 12 previous hours. And then I can't remember what features we add here. But what you'll see is the same pattern is split, train, test, and then score the model, and then evaluate the model, feed it all in together, and then look at the evaluation script at the end, and it says, what is the actual, it combines them all together. This is, just take that variable, assign it here, assign it there, and output the data. So if we were to run this, it ran pretty quickly last night. I don't know how it's going to run right now.
Hold on, real-time demo here.
Oh, real-time demo, but it's test data on,
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Thankfully, it's not a huge data set.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and run.
I don't even know what on the insider world would be as small as 17,000 rows. That'd be tiny.
Something that's small as 17,000 rows is summarized data. So a lot of what I have been pulling around some of the flight adoption information has been bucketized into 20,000 rows.
Okay.
If you collapse big buckets into or little buckets into big buckets, then yeah, you can yes, the processing takes a while on the back end, but then it's easy to start running through that information later on. You basically store up the output to do the analysis off of. So that was something that was, I think it was a 20 meg file, probably not 20,000 rows. But
that's not bad.
No, not at all. So it's running for 33 seconds. It might run longer than I have because I have an 11 o'clock meeting. So
what this means is, your data is running, but I gotta say, I will say I've been monitoring the chat the whole time, right? There are some people that seem to be super fascinated by this, and some people who may not have had previous experience to stats and deeper math or even any development type stuff. So this is new material for them, right? So definitely different scopes of audience, right? I will work with you to get the presentation that you compiled put up, so those who are interested can go through and pull it down and look through it and actually go do some of this testing out there, right?
And the links in there that take you to the source material for a lot of what I was talking about are they talk about it for an hour and a half on regression, whereas I was talking about it for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So
there's much more, and I mean maybe in the future, I have a couple next few webcasts kind of planned out.
Yeah.
But in one of the open slots that we have coming up in the future months, we can probably do a full-on data science webcast where it is completely dedicated to that.
Yeah.
Not tied in just to the bug bash and whatnot. But,
that'd be really cool.
It would be great if you could do a summary article of what you did present.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of tie it back to putting it into the context of how we take insider feedback.
What does the chat room think? Is it they want to read that article?
I think it is a bit. I think a lot of people felt that it was a bit complicated and complex, and so I think that if we can do an article that makes it a little bit real for them,
yeah, definitely.
We can use some insider examples.
It's also worth noting that I was doing this in a way that we wanted to make sure we didn't show anything we weren't supposed to.
Right.
And if we put it in a written format, we can definitely get it checked out to make sure that I'm not giving away
there we go.
secrets. There we are.
Don't get sued and don't go to jail.
That's right. All right. With that, I got to run to my meeting.
Blair, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank
folks.
you.
Very much appreciate
Thanks,
it.
insiders. Yeah.
We'll definitely have you back on.
Cool. See you, folks.
Bye-bye.
I can
So we
unplug.
do have a ton of just bug bashy questions.
Yeah.
that we should probably run through. I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
no, if you
taking
so
note.
cheers,
already.
man. Like if you've got questions that have popped up, let's just jump straight to them. Throw them at me. Let's do this.
Well, I wasn't tracking. I've just seen them. So
we got a bunch of questions. All right, what are they? Well.
Yeah, and I'd say while we bring those questions up is like,
yeah,
I know that a lot of that was pretty meaty. But it like these data scientists, I think this is not the technical term, but they are like wizards. Like they come up with such interesting insights. Like even to bring it down to like stuff that is user facing is if you go look at the hype zone on Mixer, like there are computer science things being applied to make sure you see the coolest part of the very end of PUBG sessions, for example. Yeah. There's lots of examples even on Xbox and home where we're using data science to try to make the experience be like as cool as it can be for the user and most relevant. And so while there's lots of amazing details that go into how that happens, there really is a lot of end user benefit that helps us have a better experience.
And if you guys aren't familiar with the hype zone on Mixer, it is so cool. They automatically detect if you're like in the top 5 for PUBG or something.
Yeah, when you're getting down to the last few people, it's a battle royale game, and so the most interesting part of the game often can be right at the very end. And so there's data science techniques that are doing to identify different streams that are going on that are down to that end of that game, and so that you can highlight those and have like the most hype for a PUBG stream. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, so diverging off, one of the questions is people have been asking about RS5 skip ahead.
Okay.
And I will just say that we will have more information to share about that coming actually really soon. So sit
Probably
tight.
sooner than you're expecting.
Yeah.
Well, sooner than you're expecting, not sooner than you're wanting.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this. It's not going to be this week, but it's coming. So we'll have more information. If you can't join Skip Ahead now, it's likely because the limit has been met. We don't have any plans to raise the limit, but that may change. And again, we will have more information to share about this very soon. So I just wanted to put that out there because people have been asking. But if you're still on Skip Ahead, sit tight. If you're not and you can't join, I mean, the limit's been met.
Also sit tight.
Sit tight, yeah.
We will have news to
Yeah.
share. And we
I'm
will
working
share
on
it.
that
That's right.
as we speak, so.
Yeah. So
I mean, no, because we're in the webcast. You should be focused.
Oh goodness! Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
So-
I'm working on that later.
So, so let me answer a couple questions that I've seen pop up around builds and timing and things like that. So, Slow Ring's got 17.074.1002, and Fast has 17.083. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Hooray for numbers.
Yeah, we didn't flight last week.
That is also true.
I
That
wish
is-
we'd flight last week, but it just didn't work out.
No, so I'll come to the table with what happened. There was a build bug that was introduced that I hit it on my own machine, and attempting to install build 17090. I know I'm giving build numbers away. Where during the install process, it would roll into second boot phase and just roll you back. The build literally would not install. It affected we'll just call it a significant number of machines, percentage-wise. And so, of course, once the build was downloaded, it would ping, start to reboot, start the install, roll back, and then during the next, active hours session or inactive hours, depending on how you have it set up, right? It would try to install it again, it would roll back and fail, and it would rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. So you'd be sitting there, time after time trying to install the build, and it would never install. So when you have, again, I will say a significant portion of machines that cannot install a build, and it takes a little bit of work to get the build off of the machine so it gets out of that loop. That wasn't something we wanted to introduce to the broader population. So even though some machines could have installed it, the high percentage that couldn't, it wasn't worth sending that build out. So last week you didn't get a build.
And it also prevents us from getting enough data to actually make a determination as to whether or not we should put the build out anyway.
Yeah.
And so without that data, I mean, a lot of the stuff that, the data science that Blair was talking about, we actually use that to make determinations on flight candidates. And if we can't get a certain amount of data that meets a bar, we won't flight. Because we don't, again, even though fast, we expect you to be able to kind of live with some slight pain and bugs. We still are mindful of that. And so that prevented us from getting data to even make a determination. Because, I mean, again, a large portion of the population internally couldn't install the builds or was in a loop.
Yep.
So,
of course, that leads to the next question of, well, are we going to release a new build this week? I will simply say this.
we're trying!
Yes, Brandon, spot on. We are trying. There was a build. I'm not giving away build numbers.
Anymore.
Yeah, I know, right? Other than the one I said that you didn't get from last week. You were potentially going to get 90, but you didn't get it, and you're not getting it. There is a build that hopped out of the Canary ring over into the self-host ring yesterday. Exciting stuff. We will be reviewing the data and all of the analysis behind it at Flight Ops today.
Yep.
Presuming we get good feedback on that and good information comes from it. There's a chance that you may see something coming your way. It's not going to happen today, but soon.
Was it TM?
Yeah, so with the trademark on the end of it, of course. So, we are actively trying to get you a build. I mean, we do that anyway, regardless of Bug Bash.
I mean,
but especially because of the Bug Bash, we want to get you
definitely
something to test.
Yeah, we definitely want to get a build out earlier rather than later because of the Bug Bash. We totally get that, you're Bug Bashing on an older build, but there still is some value Bug Bashing on that build. So, it's definitely has all the features for RS4.
Wow.
Mostly.
Still some.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly.
They're hinting around things they're not supposed to say.
Well, just wait for the next build. But it's mostly that, and then they're again living with the build for a while, and finding bugs. It's still important for us. So
I mean, insiders get a build every week or two, but like once you go into production, they're probably going to stay on that build for 6 months.
Yeah.
And they may not reboot during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I really hate rebooting. I really do. I go to great extents to avoid shutting down or rebooting. And so having you guys on the build for longer actually helps cover some of those scenarios where you need to have the build up for a bit longer.
Living with a build this long, it does help. Someone asked about a build drought, and Jason, I know, responded, but the longest we've gone without a build is well over a month.
Yeah.
And that's painful for us.
Yeah.
Internally, I wouldn't say that the tone on our team is gloomy, but it's frustrating. But we also stand by those decisions because, again, the last thing we want is to put out a build that we know is going to make living with that build super painful, even for fast.
Yep.
And to the Jen's point about rebooting, I do like coming into the office and logging in, and it comes up with the you just got a new build.
Yeah.
And I got a new build. So
That's fun.
Yeah.
I will upgrade over lunchtime sometimes.
Yeah.
If I know that there's a fix that I really want in the upcoming builds, and
Every single day, I take my PCs take new builds.
Okay. So one thing that I do want to ask, and this is one of the things that I try to do each of the bug bashes, is of course part of the bug bash is in its namesake bashing bugs. So for things that you have encountered along the way in this current build, and I know obviously there's quests that are being run and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I would like you to do is if you have a particularly bad bug that you want to get attention drawn to, go to the feedback hub and grab that short link and come paste it here in the chat. That does a couple things. Number one, we have a direct record of it here of things we should go and review kind of immediately, right? Because obviously if us having this conversation with you and you take the time to share it with us, right, it's something you're trying to bring to the table for us. But number two, it also draws attention to that. So your fellow bug bashers who are participating in this webcast with you, if they're hitting those same bugs, it gives them a chance to know about it or potentially find something they haven't hit quite yet, which will help drive upvotes, which you all know is super key in helping bring things to our attention. So if you have feedback that you want us to take a peek at, swing it on in. I know Brandon, myself, Jen, Brian, tons of others, right? We will be looking at this. We will be looking at the stream. Obviously, we can connect more on Twitter after the fact. But send them on in and then help your fellow insiders get some attention to those things. Uh-oh. Jen has started a poll. Do you shut down your PC? Wait. So this is like shut down, not just put
not
to
reboot.
sleep. Like actually shut it down.
Absolutely not. I never shut down. I haven't shut down a machine in years.
I actually
I get frustrated when I come home and I lose power and my machines are off, and I'm like, what? this is not right. Which actually happened. I was out of town last week, at the end of last week, because of I went to a friend's funeral for his mom. And I came home, and apparently I lost power, and I was super frustrated. Like, my machines are off.
Ooh, Obi-Wan brought up something that you were talking about before we started the webcast. 3-finger and touchpad gestures. And Jen gives the big sigh.
No issue.
No issue.
We're working on it. I'm sorry. It's totally not my team's fault, even though it kind of is.
Did we add that as an issue for 83?
Not for 83. It's listed. The next split that goes out, unless something happens, it'll be in the known issues for that.
It's a known issue. It's known issue.
I tagged the collection. Yep. So if you reported it in the feedback hub and uploaded the collection and didn't just log a new issue, you should see the proper state for that one.
Yeah, and so there's one other thing that I want to give a quick shout out to. So Crazy Cats, who I believe is still in the chat. If you are, say hi to everybody. She and what is his name? Scarfix. Scarfix is his handle on Twitter, and I think is also his handle here on Mixer. Yesterday, while I was doing testing on on my test channel for Mixer, setting up and doing some of the configuration on the mic with our webcam settings and whatnot, happened to bring a bug to my attention. And I was like, okay. Went through, validated the bug. Okay, yeah, it exists. It's a real thing. Found the feedback they had submitted and upvoted. Went ahead and made sure it was a proper bug in our system. Got feedback last night that it's already fixed and will be in a new build soon.
You might want to let us know, me or Jen know, so we can put that as fixed in our.
Yes, I don't think it actually.
Slider thing?
Yeah. I don't think it actually made the known issues list. And the interesting thing is about this, and this is one of the awesome things about Bug Bash, is in running quests, it helps people go and find things they may not normally touch, which is why the quests are super important. And so this is actually a setting I honestly never went to. I have never once gone to this setting until yesterday when it was brought to my attention. I went and validated it, and I'm like, yes, this is an actual bug. It's a problem. And lo and behold, like, the team was like, yep, we got it, and already has it fixed. Like, it was less than 12 hours till a bug got fixed. That is, quite honestly, short of some crazy deployment bug that is super impactful and is preventing us from actually deploying within, like, the canary ring or whatever. I gotta say, like, that is a crazy fast turnaround. So, big props to the team.
Let's add that to the
I will make sure it is in the flight notes. So, both to Leonard and to Susan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I mean, that's the spirit of bug bashing, right?
I mean, that highlights like the quest that we are putting for the bug bash. Like, we really do want insiders to live and use their PCs normally on these insider preview builds, because anything that you find that messes up your workflow or has changed or changes the way that you use something, good or bad, we want to hear about it. And just any feedback on that is super helpful. Like something as simple as changing your volume or adding a network or looking at photos, like all of the things that you normally do with your PC, and using our features, tell us.
Yeah, and I think like giving feedback on the new features that we're developing is important, but Windows is pretty big, and
like go about your day, use the features. Like, are you using timeline, and like how has that improved your your workflow? Has it improved? And if it isn't, tell us why it's not. Constructively. I mean, this sucks, I'm not going to ever use it. That's not great feedback. But telling us what we might be able to change about timeline to make you more productive or even better, change your workflows, that's going to help us make Windows better. And so like that, that's just super important.
Oh, what's really funny is MaxDeck94 in the chat just said, hey, one other bug, the audio sliders within settings, sound, advanced, like, isn't working right. I didn't actually say what the bug was. Yeah. That's the bug. So it's funny that somebody else is bringing it to us, right? It's this whole collective thing. That's why I was actually going to share some of the feedback links and things that you have found. It's for that exact reason, right? Like, I didn't even say what the bug was, and somebody's like, oh, hey, here's this other bug. And I'm like, that's the one, right? It's a good chance to bring these things together. So, shifting away from specific bugs, right? I saw a few links that popped in. we'll definitely look at these. I mean, we got another 15 minutes to run the webcast, so I want to get through a few more things. But obviously, these feedback links, fellow insiders, check them out. We obviously have them in the chat records. We will look at them as well. Quests. So one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the webcast was back in January, which not like it's ancient history, but three and a half weeks ago, I popped in a question and asked, what do you want to see done differently within this bug bash? And one of the things that kept resounding, right, clustering the data of responses, right, one of the things that kind of centralized quickly was in relation to quests, users wanted to see some more common type quests, right? And then the last bug bash, one of the things that was very, very focused on was things being done within hypervisor, Hyper-V, right? So set it up, do an update, try these features and functionality. Well, obviously not every insider runs Hyper-V instances on their machines. And so there was groups of insiders who were like, hey, these quests, I don't get to run them because that's not something I'm either interested in doing or I don't have the technical knowledge to go and set that up. Can you add some quests that are more user-friendly, so to speak? Well, we did that, right? I put Brian to the task. He went through and probably 20 or if not more quests that were what you would consider common themes that are really good to not lose sight of, right? Like downloading and opening and printing a PDF from Edge, or opening and editing a photo in the Photos app, right? Things like that. And there's a whole list of them.
Using maps.
Yeah, using maps. Like I don't have them all memorized, right? But they are in the quests that are available.
And my team went through all the quests and we were like, oh, nice. We don't have to make these ones.
Brian already did it.
You're welcome.
And it's a good reminder for us that part of the reason that specific quests get made is for new features that have come out during a release to help get adequate, insights into what your feedback is on them, right? You go run a quest on something that you didn't know showed up in a build. Hey, you know what? It's a chance to go and check it out and let us know what you think. Aside from that, at the end of it, when you get the pop-up that says, hey, how did you like it? Was this easy to use? All that kind of stuff. Again, we get that information back and it helps us make the assessment. But going back to our roots, right? There's so much stuff that changes build over build that there are bugs that pop up as, you put feature B on top of feature A and all of a sudden you've influenced how A functions.
I would say, we try to make the flight notes as comprehensive as possible, but they're
the number of changes that occur in each build,
changes sometimes between builds,
even outside of what's listed in the flight notes, it's huge, right? We almost quite literally could not make a full flight notes list. I'm trying to make sure I say that properly. It would be way too big.
I mean, sometimes when stuff comes through Watson, we just know that it's a high-hitting crash. We don't necessarily have a repro of it. We just have the dump and the cab files to analyze. And so it's not always clear whether we should mention it or not. But yeah, lots of stuff changes between each flight. So it's important to log it if you find something weird rather than just simmering over the issue.
So, I will say to kind of wrap up that piece of the conversation, right? I hope some of these quests, I hope you find them useful. I hope you find them beneficial. For those of you that were asking for some more of these kind of straightforward and more user-friendly type quests, I hope they meet what you were looking for. If they didn't, of course, give us that feedback. Let us know. Check out the quests, actually run through them, and let us know if they met your expectations. And of course, we will continue this into future bug bashes along the way as they occur. It's always nice to make sure you keep us on our toes and make sure we haven't broken anything along the way. Reading through some of the stuff here in chat.
The boot up experience.
Yeah, he's posted, or that person's posted about 4 times that same question. So
about the boot experience?
Yeah, we're not. The plan is there isn't any intermediate plans to change the boot experience. I mean, at many PCs, the boot up experience is so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it really just that isn't really a focus.
On modern PCs, I don't remember the last time I saw a BIOS screen flash.
Yeah.
It just zips right through it. It's just done, and especially with SSDs, and then of course the speed of CPUs and the amount of RAM in modern machines. Like my PC that I built back in 2010 that I still have at home, I see the BIOS screen where it loads up and enumerates the disks and the CD drive and all that kind of stuff, right? It's fun watching that because I'm like, it's been a while since I've seen this, and it's funny talking about rebooting machines. I don't have to reboot that one except for when updates come through. So it's fun seeing it.
One of the insiders reported something to me on Twitter, and it resulted in me having to figure out how to open the CD drive on my HP Z440 that I haven't. I got the PC like a year ago, and I've just
Never opened it.
I was like, what? I'm technical. I can find it. I did find it, but yeah, it's just one of those things you don't do very often. And actually, he was right. There was totally a regression. That wasn't on my team though. Somebody else. But hey, the poll. Only 9 of you have logged more than 6 bugs. I have logged 30 bugs for the Bug Bash. So far, we're on day 5. I have 5 more days. My team gets really competitive about the Bug Bash, so it's all fun.
For high-end hardware, for gaming or playing servers, it's quite normal to see it. Laptops, not so much. Nightmare Joker, that's actually true, and that's part of the reason that I see it on my home machine that I mentioned not too long ago. And I'm gonna go old school chatty conversation here for a second. That machine, when I built it, it was back when I was into overclocking really big. And if anybody remembers, not everybody, I'm not gonna say because most people probably don't, but overclock.net, right? The website still exists, but I was like a big fan on that site at one point in time. Back when the AMD Phenom 2 chips came out, it was when the hex cores were kind of becoming a thing. I had taken a 2.6 gigahertz hex core and on air overclocked it to 4 gigahertz. But one of the things that I had enabled was seeing the BIOS screen so I could make sure that it was properly posting, so I would know if I needed to, jump the CMOS if I had screwed something up and reset the BIOS. So yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I'm having flashbacks. Everybody's having flashbacks to college from the statistics lecture earlier. I'm having flashbacks to overclocking days, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Oh, let's see. What else are people talking about? Spotlight. Lock screen bug was fixed. Okay, cool. Nice to see bugs being fixed.
Someone had asked about Focus Assist, and we're getting some feedback on that, but not enough to warrant changing the name.
Oh, what used to be
quiet hours.
Okay.
There are some people who feel that that's not the quite Focus Assist isn't quite the
proper name.
Name. I actually think it's great. I mean, because I use it not just to do not disturb, but I actually use it to help me focus. Mm-hmm. Where I, like if I'm at my computer and I need to pull together blog posts and things like that, I turn it on. And at home, I do the same when I'm trying to do some work. So. I guess there's pros and cons to each side, but yeah, nothing that warrants the change.
Let's see here. Left pane. So Rick in here. So Rick AB57 is mentioning File Explorer in the left pane shows 2 listings of USB drives. It has for years now.
Well, if you have USB drives plugged in, they're going to list them. I mean, remove the USB drives.
Give us some more details on what the concern is, right?
Yeah.
Is it because it's showing up in multiple areas?
Yeah, they're duplicated. I've seen where you can. I've seen 5 when I don't even have one plugged in. It's like a
You
ghost.
should log the feedback.
Yeah,
I did log the feedback.
You should take that feedback link and paste it in the chat so other insiders can upvote it, Brian.
Yes, Windows will always be Windows.
Yeah, Windows is not being renamed, right?
Yeah.
We're going to rename it to like Shutters or something. I don't know. It's like yes, Windows will always be Windows. Let's see. Total feedbacks for all? Like, are you talking about like the total number of feedback items ever submitted? That's where that's millions. Like that's a huge number. Like
It's thousands a day.
yeah. See, Shutters. I know, right? Sticker boy. It's kind of funny. Let's see here. If the drive is accessed many times, it is listed in the quick access as well under this PC. That's true, right? So if that's what you're referring to, that's actually by design. But I mean, we'll see when you post up some more in here. Lots of chat about Focus Assist, man. You got people going on this, Brandon.
It's a great feature. I mean, if you're if you're going back and forth and arguing about a name, at least you're using the feature, and it's great.
Yeah, no, hey.
And send in the feedback. Send in the feedback. Send in the feedback.
Important thing
Like,
people are using.
the more feedback the team gets. But yeah, I mean, quick access. Isn't quick access by design like showing everything you've done
Recently.
So
yeah.
like if you've
it's,
accessed...
it's dynamic.
Yeah.
Yep.
I use quick access all the time because I tend to just save stuff wherever. And I don't remember where I saved it, so I use quick access.
Does stuff ever get secretly fixed within a single build? I had issues with blurry apps toast when launching a game, but it seems to have magically disappeared.
No, I mean, it probably just
none of
means you
it's really
did
magic.
something.
Somebody made a code change if your bug got fixed.
Stuff gets fixed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's behind the scenes or in secret.
Yeah.
But,
Unless it's a
But,
server-side
I
issue.
have a question maybe asking,
Yeah.
if I've taken a flight
Yep.
with a particular build and see an issue, but then it goes away,
Yep.
could something else have
Oh,
fixed
you
it
mean
in
during
on
the
the-
flight?
on the
Oh,
same build.
On the
you're-
same build.
Yeah, if you're talking about you get a build, you see a bug, and then magically on that same build, it just goes away, no. There would have been no code change that would have happened
Unless it's
it was
server-side.
related to a service-side change that totally getting it right. It was something we could have fixed, right? If it's a core OS type bug, no, you would have to take a new build update of some sort, whether it's a servicing release like with 17.074, there was the .1001 and then .1002 builds. Those were new flights that were sent, so you could have seen changes to the original 17.074 build.
Yeah.
But if it was like with a specific application, right? So say OneNote was giving you some sort of a fit. There was an update that showed up in the store. Poof, right? Your core Windows OS build didn't change, but something changed with the app because of the update that hit it from the store. So while your build didn't change, the app changed, and it may have resolved your issue. Additionally, if you take a new driver or some type of update from a third-party piece of software,
Or
like,
you reboot.
yeah, I know, rebooting fixes a lot of things. Like, say you're having a graphics card issue, you go to your manufacturer's website, install a new driver, and it fixes your issue. That, in this situation you gave about, blurry apps, that may have well been a way to fix it that wasn't because it was related to the driver itself as opposed to being an OS bug. So there's a bunch of different things that could have been taking place there.
Someone asked about the Action Center redesign, and I think we already did the redesign. I think was that RS3, right? Was that?
Yeah, we redesigned the Action Center with the Fall Creators
Yeah.
update to have a more fluid style. Any other redesigns beyond that, we don't have anything to share right now.
Uh-oh. Can't talk about it.
Add a dark theme to Edge's dev tools. I would love that. I love dark theme.
I
I
think-
want everything to be dark.
That is one of my things, right? And this has been my thing since day one. I want everything to have a dark theme or dark mode or whatever you want to call it, a dark something option. Like my feedback hub is set to dark mode, my whole OS is set to dark mode, my browser is set to dark mode. I want everything to have a dark mode option. It's just easier on, like for me, it's easier visually, right? So the more
I
dark
spend
mode.
a lot of time in dark places.
Just inside my head.
Oh goodness.
It hurts my eyes.
Let's see here.
I actually turn on inverted sometimes if stuff doesn't support dark mode. You can press. Well, you have to change it in settings, but there's an inverted mode now with a color filter, and you press Control-Win-C, and everything will go reverse colors, and it helps me.
File Explorer update to dark theme. Hey, I would love to see that. If you have a feedback link on that, send it in the chat, and I will upvote it right now, like during the webcast immediately. I hate to interject my specific issue. When I try to view a Deadspin sports video in a funny website, by the way, half of the window is missing. That's not what I'm reporting. Okay. The issue. Hold on. That thing jumped. The issue. Where did it go? Uh-oh. Let me scroll back to it here. Okay. The issue I have is when I paste the link into Edge, nothing happens. I've actually hit that bug as well. That tab just shows shows the site. The site never loads. It's just that site for me. I know a workaround for me has been to just close Edge and reopen it. But I've hit the bug that you're referring to, where you go to open a new tab and you want to paste the link, and it looks like it just eats the link and the address bar goes blank and the page never loads. And then you can paste it again and it seems like it doesn't load, but then all of a sudden 5 or 6 seconds later, it finally just pops up and the page starts loading. I've hit that as well. That is definitely feedback that should be filed. I'm guilty. I have not filed feedback on it, but this is the Bug Bash, so guess what I will also be doing. So if you have a feedback link for that one, send it to me, and rather than me filing a separate feedback, I will happily upvote your feedback so you get credit for having found that during the Bug Bash. More questions here. I gotta get back down to the new stuff. Your mouse looks like my Logitech Performance MX. It is an M510. It is my favorite old school type mouse. It's been around for years. Simple, easy, laser mouse, forward and back buttons on the left side. It's just like perfect size for my hand. I have like 6 of them because I don't want to run out, and I have broken the little USB dongles way too many times. I've got one at home that fell into pieces. Time to toss it out and replace it with another one. Let's see here. Edge on desktop. It slower freezes. So that's one of the interesting things about big buckets like that. Yeah, 23,000 upvotes. That's a ton, right? It's funny that we were talking about clustering of data earlier. That's a huge bucket that has to be split into subsetted root causes. So while that is a huge kind of just overall bucket of information, the team no doubt has to split that apart into the different root causes so they can address them piece by piece to help eliminate the bigger problem.
And I hear that sometimes they're like, why didn't you fix the one crash yet? And unfortunately it's not that easy. There's not a golden crash to fix. We use Watson, we look at all the data, it totally depends on the build. The collections you see, that's the total number from across time, but like on our side, we do have the ability to see like the number of votes per certain builds, and it helps us know, hey, something seems to have gone wrong with this build. Clearly, we need to have a new tracking item to go with this, and drill into the feedback a bit more.
Another question, how much influence do you, I guess as in this team, have on new features or addressing bugs, especially if it's not a popular or discovered one? Well, I don't mean to sound like a smart ass here, but if it's a not discovered bug, we don't have any influence because nobody's found it. If it's not a popular bug, we can still have influence in changing things. We have to know about it, and that's one of the things where, well, I've mentioned, and here's my feedback thing. Here we go. It happens every webcast. I'll harp on the importance of upvoting as opposed to filing all new pieces of feedback. Not only to mention the reduction of work on the champs who are trying to collate and understand issues and how broad the scale is, but having upvotes added to a specific piece of feedback like the Edge bucket that has 23,000 votes, it's a good way to help draw attention to it. But if there's something that's really bugging you, that it doesn't seem like it's getting a lot of attention.
Did you make that joke on purpose?
Totally I did, of course. Come share it with us. Come drop it on Twitter or start a thread on the answers forum about it. Bring it to our attention, and we're happy to look at it.
And I would say, we've said before, like, it's not all about upvotes. There are a variety of things that factor into what we decide to both fix and implement. Like, does it impact does it impact everyone in Venezuela? So like maybe it doesn't have a lot of votes, but it's 100% repro for those people, or like it requires a certain set of hardware, but it's like very consistent for that hardware. There are a lot of ways that we pivot the data in order to make decisions.
And people don't want you serving the dark side.
But they have cookies, right?
Yes, the dark side does have cookies. I'm just saying. They got to entice people somehow. There's been a lot of really good chat here. Like, I know we got some feedback links to go look at, a lot of bugs, a lot of questions. I know here shortly, after the webcast, I'm personally going to go grab lunch, but I will be back on Twitter after that, so, give me a short bit of time to get some food. But I got to say, this has been a whole lot of fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Matt, thanks for stopping in. Nikki, Trip, thanks for showing up and hanging out. Brian, right?
Trip is just mysteriously typing in the back.
He's silently conquering the world over there.
Well, apparently not as vigorously as I type.
Very sneaky.
It's that Surface laptop keyboard. It's like super quiet, as opposed to Brandon. Peter, glad to have you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Joe, as always, Joe, come get in front of the camera. Got to say hi. Joe doing his thing as always. Got to get him some recognition. Couldn't do this without him.
Yep.
So I know there's more questions. Like I said, yes, Adam from New Zealand. Yes, it is Teriyaki Tuesday. I will be eating teriyaki. Absolutely.
That is Taco Tuesday.
Not in the cafe.
Not,
H, just
not
teriyaki.
Cafe H. It's Teriyaki Tuesday. Ah.
Chicken.
So thank you all. I love doing these. I hope you had as much fun as we do. Glad to answer some of your questions. Hope the data science thing was fascinating. Next month, I'm not going to give away the topic yet, but I will say this. The current plan, and I think this is actually in the Insider newsletter, March the 6th, so mark it on your calendar. Tuesday, March the 6th, 10 a.m. Pacific time, which is 6 p.m. UTC, if I did the math correctly.
Greenwich time.
Will be our next webcast, so exactly 1 month from today. It's going to be on a topic that a lot of you have asked for. I will leave it at that. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet. So wait for the Insider newsletter that's going to come to your email inboxes, and the spoiler will be let out at that point. I won't ruin it before then. So until then, come hit us up on the answers forum. Come chat with us on Twitter. Let us know the pluses and minuses. And until then, keep insidering. Have fun with the Bug Bash. Run as many quests as you can. Let us know what you think. And any last parting words? Good?
May the force be with you. He didn't.
Keep
I mean,
Yeah,
actually,
keep
we didn't call him
bashing.
Matt.
Get the quest coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Matt, Nikki, really, really appreciate it.
I
Definitely.
think we have over 150 now in the
The
feedback
quest up,
hub.
yeah. We just released, I think the news, the 60 new ones for today just went live.
Did you say
So
60?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
released 60 more today.
Okay, so you have 60 more quests that you can go check out.
Check the feedback
Okay.
hub announcement that will be posted here shortly. It'll give you some links, direct links to some of the new ones, not all of them, but at least get you started. So that'll be posted probably within the hour or so.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, we can't post while we're here.
Yeah. Trying to, but
Trying to, yeah.
So,
Multitasking.
be on
is
the
hard.
lookout.
More
Thanks, guys.
Xbox guy next webcast.
Ooh.
It's been requested. I'm just saying. We'll just have to do an Xbox webcast.
Yeah,
just
that'd
for
be
the heck
cool.
of
That'd
it.
be awesome.
That'd be really cool.
I
I
will
mean,
put that on
apparently
the to-do
Mike was
list.
watching in the chat, so.
Well, again, thank you all for tuning in. Come chat with us, and until next time, Insider Team signing out.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.